Hey, it's Antonio here with Enhanced Movements. I'm just going to be going over some of my thoughts on motor learning and how you learn new tasks. The reason why this is so important is because a lot of what we're trying to do is almost deconstruct how someone was doing something in the past that may or may not have led to a potential issue that we're working on, but then also how to recreate something new that we would ideally think benefit that person. So much of that obviously revolves in our world around biomechanics and movement. We believe that there is health through movement, and the more you move, the better you feel, right? There's rust in rest, as Craig Liebenson will say. So we want to encourage really good positive experiences with movement, and if it's something that you're not used to, then there's a learning curve to that. Okay, so there's a couple different theories to this, and this is again kind of from just different areas that I've kind of taken from and just what my belief is, okay? So it has been said that muscles and nerves that fire together wire together. We know this from neuroplasticity, right? And the nerves are what control the muscles. So if we have neuroplasticity and we're encouraging firing together, those will wire together. Now that's critical because if we're trying to learn a new task, we need that synergy or that patterning to be repeated so that we get more consistent behaviors or habits. So if we look at this, okay, now this is kind of confusing. It'll make sense in a second here. We see these valleys and we see these hills. Now the valleys are in turn what our habits are, meaning it's kind of like a rut. It's a lot easier for us to fall into that valley and do that same thing over and over again. If it's a good behavior, that's fantastic. If it's something that's not as ideal, it obviously takes a lot of effort to get out onto something else. Now notice this is a hill. The way this example works is if we have a little ball, right? So if I have a little ball here on top and this is my new behavior I want to create, if I don't have consistency there, it's very easy for me to roll off into that valley and pattern. Now again, because it's easy to fall into that pattern, we tend to stay in there. Okay, so when we're looking at new motor patterns, if I'm trying to get someone to, better understand how to articulate and do like a hip hinge, if they've never done it before, it's going to be very challenging them to do it. It's a new pattern, it's a new behavior. If they're prone to doing their quote unquote hip hinge by rounding their back, they're going to by nature default into that more. Now, the more you do that, they'll start to better understand the differences between these, and you'll see these valleys and hills start to level out a little bit more, meaning they know what to do, meaning have that neutral spine, but every now and then they're like, I kind of roll off and I fall into the valley of the same pattern, but then they also realize that that is not ideal. It's very easy for them to change that pattern and get back into what we ideally want. And then conversely true is once all of this, again, this was our new behavior ultimately will then become the habit or pattern of which we're trying to achieve. That's the valley, and we can live down here if we want, if it's a good thing, and that's actually what we're trying to achieve. So the motor learning process, or how we do new tasks, is repetition. We need to tell the body what to do. It needs to fire together so that it'll wire together. And then ultimately what will be good is there'll be carryover into other activities that you do. Obviously we preach on the hip hinge and squatting form because it is, not to overuse a very overused term, but it is a functional movement. There's carryover into learning this stuff for patterns that is done elsewhere, whether that be a sport or an activity, whatever that is, your body will then start to understand, especially while going through this process, better body awareness, better positional awareness, so that these patterns can then carry over to other things. So the motor learning process is fantastic, especially when we're trying to change a behavior, but keep in mind, this whole process is not specific just to new tasks. Motor learning should be something that we're doing on a consistent basis. That's why we encourage play and just activities that aren't single dimensional, where you know what's going to happen all the time. That variability where you have to change and create a new movement based on interaction of someone else's movement or a ball or whatever that is, that's motor learning. The more you do that, your patterns will change, and then you'll become more efficient when you need to do that, okay? So that's the importance of motor learning, and just a couple of thoughts on our philosophy on how we do things. So if you're interested or you feel like you've kind of always been stuck in doing the same thing the same way, and or you're unsure about maybe some cues or some coaching you've got in the past, feel free to reach out. We'll share a little bit more about what we think might benefit you and how we can help you.